You know why this comparison never dies? It's not because they're both overpowered, plenty of characters are. It's because they represent two completely different answers to the same exact question. What happens when someone becomes so strong that the world stops being able to push back? Gojo and Saitama both live inside that contradiction, but the way their stories frame that isolation and what they actually do with their power creates a debate that shifts depending on whether you value the ceiling or the climb. Let's start with the obvious friction point, the one that fuels every versus thread. Gojo's infinity is not a force field. It's not durability. It's a philosophical barrier masquerading as physics. An infinite series of dividing halves that makes contact impossible through sheer spatial rejection. Saitama's entire existence, on the other hand, is built around the assumption that any problem can be solved by applying enough force in the right direction. So the surface level argument writes itself: hacks versus raw power, unstoppable force versus immovable object, but that framing is actually a trap. It assumes these abilities operate on the same axis, and they don't. Gojo's defense isn't about toughness, it's about redefining the terms of engagement entirely. Saitama's offense isn't about technique, it's about the complete absence of need for it. So when people say Gojo wins because infinity can't be punched through, they're treating Saitama like a normal fighter who just hits harder. But that's not the character. Saitama has never once faced an enemy where, how do I bypass this defense, was the question the narrative asked. The joke of his existence is that the question becomes irrelevant, and that's where the genuine uncertainty creeps in, not because we lack data, but because Saitama's entire purpose is to render data obsolete. You can't power scale a character whose power is to outgrow your scaling, but if you stop at abilities, you miss the real comparison. Gojo's infinity isn't just a technique, it's the visual representation of his entire life. There is always distance between him and everyone else. He can see everything. He can process information at a level that makes normal human interaction feel like watching someone type with their fists, and he can never ever be touched. That's not godhood. That's solitary confinement with better branding. And the tragedy is that he wants connection. He craves it. His arrogance is maintenance, not personality. He acts like he doesn't care what anyone thinks because the alternative is admitting that he desperately does, and it doesn't matter because no one can actually reach him. Saitama's isolation is almost the reverse. He's not separated by a barrier, he's separated by absence. No one fights him and lives to describe the gap. No one watches him struggle and learns from the process. His loneliness isn't existential rejection, it's boredom. He didn't lose connection because power pushed people away. He lost it because power made the struggle meaningless. And without struggle, what's the point of anything? Gojo is trapped by his own ceiling. Saitama is suffocating because his floor and ceiling merged, and now there's no room to breathe. This is where the psychological dimensions split in a way that actually affects how they fight. Gojo, for all his invincibility, fights like someone who has lost before and never fully recovered. His battle IQ isn't just about manipulating space or rewiring his own brain mid-fight through reverse curse technique, it's about fear. He calculates because he knows what happens when he doesn't. He gambles with Zerobot. 2-second domain expansions, not because it's cool, but because he understands the weight of every variable. He's never careless in the moments that matter, he just masks it as playfulness. Saitama, by contrast, doesn't calculate. He doesn't need to, but also, he doesn't know how. His fights against Boros or Garo aren't strategic battles. They're endurance tests where he waits to see if the other person can make him feel anything. And that's not humility, that's atrophy. His power didn't come with training wheels. He broke his limiter, but no one taught him how to live after the breaking. So his adaptability isn't tactical, it's existential. He doesn't learn new techniques, he learns that he cares again. That's the real growth, and it's far more rare than any power-up. People who argue Saitama wins are usually valuing the concept of potential over the concept of limitation. They're looking at Gojo's very clearly defined rules. Infinity can be bypassed if you target existence itself rather than Gojo, if you attack from outside the framework of cursed energy, if you exploit the strain on his brain from repeated domain usage. And they're saying, eventually, Saitama would just figure it out. And the narrative supports that, because Saitama's story is about the impossibility of confining him within any system. The moment Garou copied his power, Saitama just grew past him mid-fight, retroactively, to the point he rewrote the consequences of their battle through sheer temporal defiance. That's not a technique, that's a narrative middle finger to the concept of limits. So if you believe that power in fiction is ultimately about narrative permission, Saitama always wins because his genre doesn't allow him to lose. But if you believe that established mechanics matter, that a character's intelligence and preparation and ability to exploit context should determine outcomes, then Gojo isn't just advantaged, he's the correct answer. He doesn't rely on the opponent being weaker. He relies on them being unable to reach him. And Saitama, for all his strength, has never shown the specific kind of spatial or conceptual manipulation needed to cross that infinite distance. He punches through dimensions accidentally. Gojo manipulates them surgically. But here's the layer that actually makes the debate worthwhile, the one that stops it from being a simple hacks versus brawn checkbox. Both characters, in their respective stories, are used as symbols of systemic failure. Gojo is the strongest because the jujutsu world is rotten and needs one person to carry everyone else. His power is the symptom of a broken system, not the solution to it. He knows this. That's why he teaches, not because he's suited for it, but because he refuses to let the world need another him. His victory condition isn't winning fights, it's making himself obsolete. Saitama, meanwhile, is the strongest because the Hero Association is a performance, a hierarchy built on rankings and publicity rather than actual effectiveness. He's at the bottom of the class system while being the only one who can actually end threats permanently. His struggle isn't against monsters, it's against a society that can't recognize value unless it's packaged correctly. So when you compare them, you're not just comparing power sets, you're comparing two different answers to the question of what strength is for. Gojo uses his to build a generation that won't need him. Saitama uses his to find a reason to keep showing up. One is forward-facing, investing in legacy. The other is searching for meaning in the present. Neither has found peace. And that's why fans can watch the same scenes and walk away with completely different winners. If you value tactical precision, emotional intelligence under pressure, and the ability to win through understanding rather than overwhelming force, Gojo is the obvious choice. He's never lost a fight where the deck wasn't stacked against him by fate, narrative inevitability, and an opponent who had centuries to plan around his specific existence. If you value growth, potential, and the idea that no cage is permanent, Saitama is the only answer. His entire arc is about shattering whatever box people try to put him in. The Gojo fandom mourns what his strength costs him. The Saitama fandom waits for him to finally feel the cost and maybe care again. Those aren't the same conversation, and they don't produce the same verdict. I've gone back and forth on this more times than I can count. There are days I think Gojo wins, because infinity is a logic problem Saitama has never been asked to solve, and his fighting style is pure instinct. He doesn't analyze, he reacts. And against someone like Gojo, reaction isn't fast enough when the space itself is weaponized. Then I remember that Saitama has already faced someone who rewrote the rules of their fight in real time, and his response wasn't to outthink it, it was to out-exist it. And I realized the debate isn't really about who beats who. It's about whether you believe that overwhelming power can ever truly be contained by a clever enough technique. Gojo's story says yes. He was sealed, he was wounded, he was killed, because the world around him found ways to work around the god in the room. Saitama's story says no. Every attempt to limit him, define him, or trap him has failed, and the narrative itself laughs at the attempt. So the winner isn't a character, it's whatever you need strength to mean.